Hello, and welcome back to the Irish Tennis Updates podcast. My name is Adam, your host. This week I'm chatting to John Morrissey. John had a stellar junior career with a career high ranking of 30 in the World ITF. He reached the quarterfinals of the Youth Olympics in Singapore in 2010. He competed in all four of the junior Grand Slams 2 times each. He was a practice partner for Nadal at the French Open and for the Bryan Brothers at Wimbledon. He went on to college in the US and was an All-American in his final year at Stanford University. Since graduating, John has followed his passion for medicine, training as a doctor in Dartmouth University. I really enjoyed chatting to John. I think he has some really great stories to share and some really good insights along the way as well. I hope you enjoy this episode, and without further ado, here is John Morrissey. John, firstly, just a big thanks for coming on to talk today. How are things with you?
Good. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
How have the last few months been for you? I know you're based over in the States, so how have you been getting on?
Yeah, I've been doing well. I'm at Dartmouth at the moment, doing a joint MD MBA program. So it's kind of a 5-year program where you do both your MD and your MBA. And so the last few months I've been making that switch from the MD into the MBA program. And so that's been a little bit of an adjustment, kind of using, flexing my mind in ways that I haven't in a few years. I've been pretty deeply involved in the sciences. And so it's been a really interesting transition, and things are going well. Obviously, unique time with COVID, and certainly an interesting time to be starting a new program and trying to meet new people within COVID parameters.
Yeah. And just to hop into your kind of tennis journey. So what are your kind of earliest memories you have in tennis?
Well, I think so. I'm the youngest of 4, and we were all pretty sporty. And I think as the youngest kid, you always want to play with your older siblings. And so, in particular, I was very keen to play with my brothers, and my older brothers were playing a ton of tennis. And so, I think I kind of started playing just to kind of join in, and loved it, and things snowballed from there.
Yeah. And so how much did you kind of train as you were a junior? How much would you have played, and how did that kind of, increase as you got older as well?
Well, it certainly kind of evolved. I think, I started maybe playing tournaments at around 8 or 9. And then, I would play a few different sports. I played tennis. I played some rugby in school. And then gradually kind of you start picking one sport and to focus on. And for me, that was tennis, and probably started focusing on that around 13, 14, and doing kind of a few mornings a week before school. Usually, I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then every afternoon, basically for a couple hours as well, and then on the weekends too. So obviously that evolved as I got older. When I was about 15, I went over to an academy in Belgium, and I started kind of training more full time. But when I was in Ireland, I was probably doing an hour and a half in the morning 3 times a week, and then maybe 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon during the weekday. So it was fairly intense, but I loved it.
I know then after you moved over to Belgium and you got towards the end of those junior days, I know you got to play some of the junior Grand Slams. You played them all twice, I believe. So which one was the first one you got to play? And how was that kind of that first one? How was that experience for you?
So the Australian Open was my first slam in 2009, and it was an incredible experience. Obviously, I had done pretty well on the ITF circuit to build my ranking up, and then with the calendar year flipping, all of the people that kind of graduate from juniors fall off, and you're eligible. Your ranking inevitably moves up a bit, and I was eligible for the qualifying that year, and so I was really excited going over. I went over with a team from the academy in Belgium that I had been working with for the few years prior. And it was really great. I remember having to play qualifying, which was actually on a different site. And then the day before my final round of qualifying, I remember my coach and some other people from the team were going to the main site to kind of watch some matches. And he was saying, "Oh no, John, you should stay at home. Wanted me to focus on my match tomorrow and not get too caught up in all of the atmosphere and everything," which turned out to be a smart move. I remember playing a pretty good match in the final round of qualies. And yeah, it was just an incredible experience. The first day I kind of stepped onto the main site and kind of getting your player's badge, and that whole experience was pretty immense.
Yeah. Which one was the most successful for you as you played them?
I would say that the Australian Open, my first time, was the most meaningful, kind of having made it through the qualies and kind of having that first experience. Perhaps I'll touch on this later, but I think my most successful big tournament was definitely the Youth Olympics. But they were all they all have their own feel for them. So you certainly.
We will get on to touch on those. I'm looking forward to that. But just while we're touching on the Grand Slams, which one was your favourite to play?
So I think they all have kind of special memories. I think that as I mentioned, the Australian Open kind of has that like initial impact because it was my first one, and then the French was really special to me because when I went there in my second year, I was directly into the main draw, and I got to practice with Nadal a couple of times, and so that kind of has a really unique spot in kind of my memories. And then obviously growing up in Ireland, Wimbledon is also the one that everyone thinks about too. So I'd say tough to choose just one because they all kind of are pretty unique in their different atmospheres and stuff.
Yeah. I say you got to meet and train with Nadal. Was that in the French Open, you said?
It was, yeah. I was fortunate enough. The senior players often will ask the tournament to arrange for a junior player to practice with or to warm up with. And that year I was on the ITF touring team, which is made up of a group of 6 or 8 players from countries that don't have a massive tennis history. And they kind of, you have to be, I forget what the cutoff is, but top 50 or something in the world. And they will kind of sponsor you to go on a touring trip. And so Nadal's team, I guess, asked for a junior to warm him up for his match against Almagro. And then through the ITF team, I got hooked up with them, and we played on Chatrier, which was just an incredible experience. Oh, yeah. We were, the court itself is just massive. And then warming up, obviously, you're trying not to miss, try to do your best. But his whole team was really welcoming. I specifically remember his physio was just kind of running around picking up the balls and telling me, like, don't worry about don't need to be nervous. Yeah, everyone's nervous the first time that they're hitting Nadal. And yeah, it was a really incredible experience. And my brother and parents managed to sneak into the stadium to watch it too. So that was kind of a nice experience.
Amazing, How did you actually find it to train with him? Like, was you might say like, oh, it's just tennis, but like, is it when you're playing with him? Is it it feels different? Like,
yeah, it definitely was a completely unique experience. That day was about maybe 45 minutes, and it just kind of the speed and the spin on those shots were unbelievable. Obviously hadn't felt the weight of a ball like that before. And then fortunately the next day we practiced for a couple of hours. I guess he thought that I must have been a good hitting partner the day before, so asked for me back the next day, and that was kind of a 2-hour session, which is where I really got to feel his intensity, and that was really unique, and just an incredible experience that I'll never forget.
Yeah, no, incredible. Do you think you took something from that? Did you learn from that and take something forward?
Definitely. I mean, it's a sense of confidence. I mean, you're only really hitting up and down the middle for the warm up, and then at the end of the practice session, I remember we played a tiebreaker, and it's just you kind of feel like, oh, if I can rally, and it certainly builds your confidence. I think I definitely took something from that. Moving forward to the next week was my next tournament was Wimbledon, so it was obviously a little bit different, on the grass versus dealing with the heavy Nadal forehand on the clay. But I definitely took some of those intangibles, seeing his work ethic and intensity and things like that.
Yeah, no, I feel like to play with him on Philippe Chatrier is even an extra element above another practice with Nadal. It just makes it even more special.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, as we saw this year, he just continues to dominate. And so, first time on one of the kind of center courts at the majors too. And I don't think, until I was on there, I really grasped like how big the runoff is between the baseline and the back of the court. And so, it was an incredible experience, and one that I definitely won't forget.
Yeah. So as you're playing these Grand Slams, you're kind of 17, 18, what's your kind of school situation? Are you still in school, or are you kind of more, obviously you're based in Belgium, you said, in the academy. So how's that working for you?
Yeah, I was kind of keeping up with school. I definitely, after my second year of playing the Grand Slams, I went back to sixth year and I did a full 6 year. But while I was away, I was kind of just keeping up with school. I was obviously taking French when I initially moved to Belgium. I didn't speak any French, and all the coaching was through French, and so I'd gotten pretty fluent, and so that helped. And then in addition, I was taking some maths classes and some English classes, so kind of taking it over during the tournament, and when I was at Belgium, and then I kind of had an intense 6 year to kind of make up for everything that I hadn't covered, and then also just finish out secondary school.
Yeah, okay. So then, as when you do that, obviously tennis is still in very much the forefront of your mind, and you go off to college in the States after school. So at what point, I guess, was that an easy decision for you to go to the States for tennis?
I was back and forth on it. I think that you're playing those junior Grand Slams, and you can see kind of, you see the ATP guys playing, and you kind of, it's an incredible experience, and you want to keep going, and you want to go right onto the pro tour. And there's definitely part of me that wants to do that. And I've been pretty successful as a junior, and so I certainly had kind of confidence that I could at least give it a shot. But then, as I found out more about college, and my older brother went to college, so I got to kind of hear some about college through him. Just the caliber of players at the top level in college too. That frequently kind of the top 10 players in college were getting to be top 100, top 200 on the ATP tour. And so kind of as I found out more about college and this chance to really have incredible training, incredible facilities, incredible coaching, and high level match play for 4 years, and kind of build my game and build my physique. At that point, you're only 17, 18, you're kind of haven't fully filled out as kind of an adult tennis player. And so, as I got to know more about college and the opportunity to develop my game, and then also have that golden safety net of getting a premier education, it became the right choice for me. So
absolutely, yeah. No, so you went to Stanford. How did you decide to go there?
So I was between a few different colleges at the time. I was obviously very into my tennis. I had just been on the ITF tour a lot, and so one of the things was kind of what was the tennis ranking of the colleges, and then obviously also looking at the academic prowess of the colleges too. And so I was definitely looking at a few. I took a visit to Texas as well, but at the end of the day, Stanford just had an incredible balance of I think they were like top 5 in the country at tennis, and one of the top 2 or 3 in academics. And so it just was too good to turn down. And my brother had been there before as well, so that was certainly didn't hurt their recruiting efforts.
Yeah. So how did you kind of settle in? How were those initial weeks and months as you start into that?
It was a big transition, but I'd lived away from home for a couple of years in Belgium, and so kind of living away from home wasn't that different for me. We had when I was a freshman, we had 2 incredible seniors, Bradley Clan and Ryan Thatcher, who were playing number 1 and number 2 for us. Brad went on to have a pretty successful pro career as well, and so they were really good in terms of looking out for us and helping us make that adjustment. And I think the first half of the season up until Christmas is more kind of individual tournaments, and then the team-based competition starts happening after Christmas. And so the first half, you're kind of getting used to it. You're getting used to balancing school and your tennis at college, and you're getting used to the way that college tennis is kind of set up. It's a totally different atmosphere, and there's also just a ton of really good players in college, and so you're getting used to that too. You come from being maybe one of the better juniors in the world, and then you come into college and there's a ton of really good players, and so that was adjustment too. And it's fortunate to have great coaches and great seniors to kind of lead me through that transition.
Yeah. But so how did your 4 years there compare to what you would have expected going in?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what. It's tough to have expectations, and you hear about college tennis, and you hear about other people's experiences. I had an incredible experience, and I think better than I could have hoped for. I started off playing 4 or 5 on the lineup, and so there was definitely lots of room for me to grow and lots of places for me to build my game. And as I said, had some good mentors that helped me do that. And from a tennis perspective, we were really good the first year. Brad and Ryan left, and we took a little bit of a dip our second year, and then built our way back up to winning the conference. And being kind of top 10 my senior year as well. So it was an incredible experience, kind of roller coaster ride from the tennis perspective, and then also just from a non-tennis perspective, just amazing to meet so many people from so many different backgrounds. And yeah, I wouldn't change it. It really was a great opportunity for me, and opened my eyes to so many possibilities outside of tennis as well.
Yeah. Do you have a couple of best memories you look back on from your time in college?
Well, I'd say tennis specifically would be my senior year. We were, the Pac-12, which is a conference that Stanford is in, is a really strong tennis conference. USC and UCLA, Stanford and Cal are all in that, and they'd be kind of the better tennis schools there. And USC had been number one for a couple of years and won the NCAA title a few years in a row, and we hadn't got over the hump against them. And then my senior year, as captain, we were playing them, and if we won against them, we were going to win the Pac-12 in the conference, which also would have been the first time. And came down to my match, and it was a bit of an epic three-setter, and ended up managing to pull it out. And my parents had actually visited that weekend, and there was some good celebrations. And so that's certainly kind of working really hard and getting over the hump, beating USC, and kind of it coming down to your match is pretty special memory for me. So that would be one. And then, off the course, a lot of different, from an academic standpoint, Evan Boland was a professor, an English professor, who I think we've all studied for the Leaving Cert in Ireland. And so, I got to know her and take some of her poetry classes, which was pretty unique. And, I was part of a fraternity that my brother was in. And I remember him coming down and just being able to share some experiences with him too was also incredible too. And obviously you have the college football and the tailgates. And so, there's too many memories to recount.
Yeah, and I guess that's so special, the one you mentioned, to win the conference and be in your match as well. And I can just ask you were an All-American. Well, what's that actually mean?
So there's a few different ways you can become an All-American, and there are criteria to meet. I think if you're ranked in the top 16 in singles in the year-end rankings, or the top 8 in doubles in the year-end rankings, or if you make like the semifinals of the individual tournament, or the quarterfinals of the individual tournament, singles or doubles. So it was my senior year, ended up 7 in the country, with my doubles partner, Robert Steinman, at the time. So that was a really cool achievement to get. Yeah,
I see. Okay. It's very impressive. Very impressive. Well, what do you think was the biggest thing you learned from college that you made you took from it and took forward?
From just a life perspective, or from a tennis perspective, or what?
A life perspective, if that's what you think that the biggest kind of where the biggest learnings were.
Yeah, I think what I learned was just how attributes that made me successful in my tennis career are just so transferable to other areas. That there's no substitute for hard work, dedication, and just kind of being, when you're passionate about something, just diving right in. And I think, I had no real background in the sciences, and I kind of realized that I had this passion to take care of patients, and I was able to transfer just, those same, hours of serving at targets, just changed into, learning about pathology and cellular mechanisms. And it's just kind of been surprising how two totally different things, can actually bear down to some of the same traits.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I do want to come back to that a little bit as well later on, about kind of what tennis has kind of, given you, and almost, as outside of tennis. And just before we move off college, I know that through Stanford you have a bit of a connection with the Bryan Brothers. So just tell me a little bit about that kind of relationship that you have with them.
Yeah, so Stanford Tennis is a very storied program, and a lot of alumni, like the McEnroes and the Bryan Brothers and others, Paul Goldstein. And as a result, a lot of the alumni will come back and, when they're in the area. And the Bryan Brothers were obviously still on the tour when I was at college there. And at the time, there was the SAP Open in San Jose, which I think was a 250, HP 250. And they were kind of practicing warming up for the tournament. And they asked, is there someone on the team that they could use for some doubles drills? And so I practiced with them there, and went well and ended up spending the week with them at the ATP tournament. And then I was fortunate enough to get a call that summer when they were at Wimbledon asking if I wanted to come over and kind of be their hitting partner for the Wimbledon tournament. So really incredible experience to kind of learn from them and hear about their stories as college tennis players. And yeah, it's truly unique just to get some of those interactions and learn from them.
Absolutely. I know you have the Bryan Brothers on your list, you have Nadal on your list, you're not doing too bad.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. And there's a final point there on college. You mentioned Paul Goldstein, who was kind of involved with you as well as the coach, I believe. So what do you think you learned from him?
So he came on my senior year as head coach, replaced Coach Whitlinger, and he's just incredibly passionate about the game. He played at Stanford back, I believe it was in the 90s, but back then Stanford won basically every year. They won the title all 4 years that he was there, and then he went pro and had a pretty successful career himself, getting to about top 50 or top 60 in the world. And so when he came back, he just brought a ton of energy to the program and kind of instilled this sense of belief into the program. And he'd get out there on the court and he'd still beat you on the cross court drills. And so he really brought kind of a renewed energy to the program my senior year. And I think that energy combined with a great squad was what kind of brought those successes my senior year, resulting in that Pac-12 title.
Yeah. I just want to move on. I think we're going back in time a bit, but to touch on the Youth Olympics of 2010. So at what point did you find out that you were eligible you kind of qualified for those games?
Yeah, it was. I believe that was one of the first times that tennis was in the Youth Olympics, and so there was a little bit of figuring out what the criteria was. I believe it was you had to be top 2 in your country, and then also top 50 in the world was kind of the breakdown. And so I was fortunate enough to meet those criteria and head out to Singapore. I worked with Owen Casey, who was my coach at the time, who I believe has been on this podcast as well, and did some great preparation and had a wonderful experience there as well.
Yeah, so on that, the preparation. So how were those kind of couple of weeks before you head off? And how are you, you're really, how's that? Are you nervous as well? Like, how are you feeling?
Definitely. It's different to the Grand Slams for sure. And, just being a part of an Olympics is really unique. Meeting people from the Irish team that were competing in different sports was really interesting. Seeing the small wrestlers versus the long jumpers and like all the different talents and body shapes and sizes. It was really kind of cool. And then Owen came up with a really great training program. He had me in black plastic bin bags and tracksuits and getting into the sauna after practice, and he had it all worked out to a T. And fortunately, it paid off because Singapore was certainly humid and hot. Yeah.
So once you get there and you get playing, I know you have a really good run. So how were those matches, and how did you kind of play, and how were those experiences of competing at it?
Yeah, I remember the first match. I was down 5-2 in the first set, down a break. I wasn't playing great, and there was a rain break. And I remember I went into the locker room with Owen, and it's been a while now, so I can't remember exactly the words that were said, but essentially, I'd had a few weeks of really good preparation, and just kind of focused on how I had been playing up to this point, and kind of instilling that belief that I was certainly ready to do something, maybe make a run in this tournament. And that rain delay, I remember, was certainly a key moment in that match. And then my kind of confidence started snowballing. Second round, I remember I played Beretta, who was 2 or 3 in the world at the time, and it definitely played my best match of my junior career. And I still remember, I think it was maybe 6-2 or 6-3, and then 7-6 in the second. And it's really kind of a unique experience because you spend your whole life thinking about Wimbledon and the US Open and Roland Garros, but putting on the Ireland t-shirt and having the rings on the t-shirt, it really was an incredible experience. So it was definitely something I look back fondly upon.
Brilliant. Would you say that's one of your best memories from tennis? Would that rank up there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'd certainly put that up there. The USC match up there. Those would both be right at the top.
Yeah, and just another point there. You mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, but I guess what's so special about being at an Olympics or a Youth Olympics is the whole range of sports. It's not just tennis, which is different to most events you'll be at. So, do you have any kind of good stories from other Irish athletes, or being at other events, or something that you wouldn't normally have been exposed to unless it was the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, I remember just like kind of hearing about everyone else's training programs, and obviously, every sport is at that level so detailed, and so it's at such a high level. I remember I didn't go to anybody else's events before the tennis tournament because Owen and I had been pretty disciplined about trying to just focus on putting in a good performance. But after you'd come home from the training center, you'd talk to the other athletes and hear about their days. And I remember hearing about one of the wrestlers was 4 or 5 kilos like overweight, less than 2 days before his wrestling match, and hearing about how he was going to lose all that weight. And yeah, it's really, really incredible to see other athletes do amazing things. Yeah, I think that was a special part, just being part of like a broader Irish team.
Yeah, for sure. So to jump back then, so I guess that would have been before college, and you had your time in Stanford. And then after college, firstly, what a year was it that you finished, and then what did you then do after college?
So I graduated in June of 2015, and it was around my junior year that I started thinking that I wasn't going to pursue professional tennis after college. And so I tried a few different things. I shadowed interventional cardiologist, pediatric interventional cardiologist at UCLA for a couple of weeks, which was really inspiring, just seeing how he was, fixing holes in kids' hearts, and that, the patient interaction was something that I was really drawn in by. I tried finance route. I did investment banking internship at Goldman one summer, and I basically realized that, the treating patients was something that I was the most excited about, more excited about that than continuing to pursue my tennis career. And so I went to the University of Virginia to complete like a 12-month pre-med course, which is in the States, you have to you essentially do biochemistry and all of those courses in college before you can apply to medical school. And because I had come to medicine a little bit later in my decision, I had to go and do like a 12-month course at the University of Virginia, and then did a little bit of research the following year and applied to medical school. So.
Yeah, so since then, have you been, because I know you did some exams just last week, so you've kind of been on that journey since then, pretty much this?
Yeah, exactly. So medical school in the States is 4 years in large part because you've done a lot of those core sciences. And so I came here in 2017 and I've finished the first 3.5 years of medical school. And then I'm taking some time out now to complete the MBA, which is basically a year. So I'll do this year in the MBA program and then finish up med school the following year.
Yeah, I'll just go back for a second there. And you said obviously this, you kind of were moving away from the notion of pro tennis and towards this notion more of medicine. So what main factors did you kind of push that decision for you?
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about my life long term and what was I most passionate about. And there's so many opportunities from a place like Stanford. I started exploring those, and one of those was going down to work with that cardiologist for a few weeks, and another was having that finance experience. And I think, when I sampled a few different things, just medicine was kind of igniting a passion in me that, was greater than anything else. I think, I loved my tennis and it gave me so much throughout the course of my life, the opportunity to compete in the majors and go to Stanford. But I think that kind of passion for pursuing pro tennis had maybe been overtaken by just an excitement to go into medicine and take care of patients.
Yeah. As you said there, how much it had given you. So like, how do you think that it still helps you today, the background you have at that high level of tennis?
Yeah, I think honestly, no matter what you do, if you do it at a high level, there's certain common traits. You have to be able to work pretty hard at it. You have to be able to kind of perform under pressure, work well within a team, whether you're kind of working in an orchestra or playing playing high level tennis. And for me, kind of, playing in pressure environments, like that match against USC, and kind of working within your team all year, which is unique about college tennis. And then just that dedication to pursuing a common goal. Those are all things that are pretty transferable for me now. A physician works with a resident, works with nurses, works with hospice care. A physician obviously has to put in lots of long hours of study and dedication. And so I have found that tennis has given me a lot of tangible skills that have helped me to this point, and I hope will continue to help me.
Yeah. And it strikes me that it must have been a really brave decision for you to take that decision to go down the medicine route. Because I imagine there would have been a lot of people around you that would have expected you to take the tennis route. Obviously the success that you'd had, in juniors and in college, might have been, people might have expected you or wanted you to do that. But you knew what you wanted yourself and kind of stuck to that. So it seems like it was the right decision for you. But people around you might have been questioning it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was definitely a huge switch. As I mentioned, I kind of came to medicine later in my time at Stanford, and it's a big switch. Really fortunate to have just incredibly supportive family and my coaches at Stanford. Everyone supported my decision, which was nice. It's obviously tough to give up something that was just a primary part of your life for so long, and something that had given you so much and you loved and you knew you were good at, for something that you were excited and passionate about, but you didn't know as much about, and you knew you'd be kind of restarting at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. And so it was a big decision, but happy I made it.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at it now, what are your next couple of years looking like?
So I'll finish. So this year is a full MBA year, and then the following year we'll be finishing up medical school, and then I'll be graduating from Dartmouth, and I'll do a residency. So residency in the United States, depending on whether you go into surgery or internal medicine, can vary in length. So it'll be here for the next 18 months, and then moving on to residency.
Yeah, and just all the best with that as you go on, because I know you've been on this path, and you all the best for the rest of it. But just a couple more questions for you, John, before we finish up. If you were to give your teenage self, maybe your young teenage self, some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Good question. I think that college tennis is definitely was a great decision for me, and I think is a really good decision for rising junior tennis players. The level, if you want to go play professionally, is more than good enough to prepare you to go on. You see John Isner, you see tons of examples in the top 100, 200. And so I think, to embrace the idea of going to college tennis and would certainly be one. And then just being open to unexpected twists and turns in your journey. I certainly didn't expect to go to college in the States, and then I certainly didn't expect to pivot toward medicine. And so kind of keeping an open mind and definitely considering college tennis would be two things that I'd say.
Yeah, brilliant. And finally, what's your favorite thing about tennis?
I think I love tennis because there's so many different parts of it. It's kind of your mental strength against your opponent's mental strength. You're figuring out their strategies, they're figuring out yours. You need to be fast, but also have good endurance. You need to, there's so many different sides to tennis. And so I think it's really, really unique sport in that way. And I think that combination of the mental and physical is something that I love about tennis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I said final question, but what's your relationship with tennis now? Like, do you play? Do you watch? How does that fit into your life at this stage?
So I do, not much, but I definitely, I love tennis, and so I get out when I can. I play sometimes with the players on the Dartmouth team here, and then during COVID, more recently, have been hitting a little bit with the men's coach here. They obviously don't have organized practices this fall, and so anyway, that's been nice. The coach has some free time. We've just been getting out and hitting. So Yeah, I love to play. I don't always have as much time as I would like to play, but yeah, certainly try and keep it up a little bit at least.
Yeah, yeah. All right, brilliant. I think we'll leave it there, John. Just a big thanks again for talking and sharing your stories. It was great to get insights into that, and a big thanks and all the best as for the next couple of years and onwards.
Of course, Adam. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. It's a pleasure. A big thanks once again to John Morrissey for his time today. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Irish Tennis Updates podcast. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe, comment, leave a review, and share the podcast with someone you think might also enjoy it. Until next week, I've been Adam. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.